and welcome back to another episode of the Choose954 podcast, episode 96, with David Jobin here from his beautiful offices at the Our Fund headquarters in Wilton Manors, Our Fund Foundation. If you didn't know about Choose954, myself, Evan Snow, and my business partner, Mr. Andrew Martineau, as arts advocates, community builders, and placemakers, started a social movement to cultivate culture and community here in my native Broward County, where I'm very proud to be born and raised from, in an effort to keep people in the know with all the great things that are going on, to make this a better place to live and not just a better place to vacation, because we live here. The point of the podcast is to connect you with passionate individuals like him that do important things in the community, and they do quite a bit. But without much further ado, for those that are not familiar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself personally, professionally, and kind of how you arrived to this stage of your career here at Our Fund?
Sure. I'm 61 years old, I'll admit that. I have been in the nonprofit sector since I was 25. It's a way to give back to the community. I know that I probably could have been more profitable in the for-profit world, perhaps, but I've really enjoyed this sector. I started off my career in arts and culture. I managed arts and culture organizations, theater companies, primarily until about 15 years ago when I made the switch into the LGBTQ space. And I did that by kind of transitioning and becoming the executive director of the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C., which at the time was the largest gay men's chorus in the world.
Okay. And how did you arrive to South Florida from that point?
So that's interesting. So while I was the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. executive director, I met my now husband, Angel Burgos. We lived in Washington, D.C., and he got a job at Florida International University, which required us to make a move south. And I came kicking and screaming, primarily because I was afraid there wouldn't be arts and culture here in South Florida. And I was so pleased to find that there is. And it was an evening when we were looking at relocating. We went to a show at Island City Stage.
Nice.
And I thought this is the quality of work that I would see in Washington, D.C. And it really convinced me that there is this depth of artistry here in South Florida we should be really proud of. And I jumped right in.
Amen. Great place to go to find out about the arts.
It was their first show. It was their first play.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you now been here in South Florida?
I think that was 13 years ago. So I've been here 13 years.
Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason.
And for those that are not familiar, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you guys do here with Our Fund?
So when I moved here, I got a job at Stonewall National Museum and Archives, which is the second largest LGBTQ archives in the country. And I was there for 2.5 years. And while I was there, the Our Fund Foundation was our largest funder. So I began to have, I instantly developed this respect for Our Fund. And this was always my dream job. And my predecessor, a gentleman, Tony Timoraeus, was ready to retire. And I had been at Stonewall for 2 or 3 years, and I made the jump here. So we're an LGBTQ community foundation. So I always say, yes, we're a community foundation, but we're a community within a community. So more similar to a Jewish federation. So we work with a tribe of people who want to perpetuate kind of the values of being an LGBTQ person. So we help them with that through their legacies and estate plans. And it's a great model, and it was a perfect place to do this in South Florida with the density of LGBTQ households.
Certainly. And I recently became familiar and started a donor advised fund, but I know it's still something that is relatively new to some people's purviews. Right. So for those that are not familiar, how do you guys operate and kind of distribute the funds?
So we kind of operate in two worlds, right? We have legacy funds, which are monies that people leave to us that then are in our charge, and we distribute those monies according to kind of the instructions they gave us before they passed. We also have donor advised funds. So we have people who are philanthropic, and sometimes for tax purposes, sometimes just for ease of giving. Mm-hmm. It's easier to do it with a partner. So they'll make a considerable gift, anywhere over $10,000 to up to, we have them over $1 million. And we distribute those funds according to their wishes over their lifetime.
Amen.
So the gift is ours once they give it to us, but for us to keep maintaining this side of the business, we have to keep a good reputation. So to date, we've never had a request from a donor advised fund holder that we have not been able to follow. But it would be interesting down the road if somebody has a change of heart and suddenly starts to support anti-LGBTQ efforts. I think then we'd probably run into a problem, and then we'd call them out and say, this is our money and it's
thankfully there's
we're
enough
not following your wishes.
Thankfully there's enough good organizations here to fund, and you guys have done quite a bit of funding and support. So just for listeners' sake, who are some of the organizations that you fund and benefit, or what is some of the tangible work that you guys are doing in the community?
So I'll start with agencies. So, I think because we're an LGBTQ community foundation, people assume we're giving to the Pride Center and, SunServe and the Gay Men's Chorus of South Florida. And yes, we're doing all of that, right? Any LGBTQ-centric organization is clearly on our radar in our network of agencies that we support. But there are also organizations like Gilda's Club. Gilda's Club, if you're not familiar, it's an organization that deals with families who have been impacted by cancer. Not necessarily an LGBTQ organization,
correct?
But they have a strong programming arm to support LBT women, lesbians, and so that's something that we support. Big Brothers Big Sisters, not an LGBTQ organization, but has a really strong Pride program that we step in and support. So any organization that intersects with LGBTQ issues, we're able to step in and help provide support to that.
And this conversation comes at a unfortunately serendipitous timing in light of the poor decision for recent funding cuts by our wonderful governor. How was our fund able to help step in and provide support and kind of bridge some of those gaps from the funding cuts?
So, it's unfortunate of the timing of this decision on the part of the governor. First of all, it was just incredibly short-sighted when you think of what arts and culture generate in terms of dollars spent in any region. He's impacted not just the organizations that he was so short-sighted to cut off funding from, but the entire region suffers, right? Restaurants suffer, parking lots suffer. So many businesses will suffer from this bad decision. But what we were able to do is identify 8 LGBTQ specific organizations that were slated to receive state funding that out of nowhere suddenly were waiting for a check and then told it wasn't coming, even though they had been told they could budget that into their year. So we put out a notice to our supporters saying, here's the impact. There's a $150,000 gap that we would like to help fill. They stepped in. The agencies also went out and did a good job of fundraising on their own. So collectively, the 8 agencies and our fund were able to raise the $150,000 and negate the impact that this could have had. What we don't want to have happen is for state legislators to say, well, look, they filled that gap. They don't need us. I say this is similar to like a hurricane, right? You can get through it, but you can't get through it year after year after year.
Correct.
So, the lesson learned for us is that we are able to take care of and lift up ourselves in those really trying times. I would say our community we are resilient if nothing else. We've learned how to support one another.
Amen. Yes, you have. And it is, it's significantly short-sighted decision because the arts, you mentioned for the region, but more specifically us here in Broward County, and I've lived here my whole life and been supporting the arts now almost for 10 years. We've been in the shadows of Miami, and we're the stepchild to Palm Beach, the culture capital of Florida, who all work together to embrace the arts very well, not only visual, but performing and all forms of art. And they've reaped tremendous benefits as a reward. And unfortunately, here in Broward County, we just haven't had the same George Perez's or Tony Goldman's or Moishe Manas or Craig Robbins or these Dela Cruz's that have established collections and foundations and supported the arts to the tune of $1 million that have reaped the rewards, and the fruit of their labor is now being seen in their communities. So when you guys are able to step in, it really is not only saving the lives of the organizations that rely on the funding, that budgeted for the funding, but the patrons of those organizations, the communities in which they serve, the tourists that like to experience the arts when they come here to Greater Fort Lauderdale and Broward County. You have supported some obviously very noteworthy causes and also some lesser known causes. Who are some of your favorite success stories, or who are maybe some of the lesser known organizations that maybe you guys have supported, aside from the Arts Uniteds of the world and a lot of organizations that people maybe know?
You talked about kind of the breadth of the arts here in Broward County. We serve Miami-Dade and Broward, so I want to be careful to
Fair
not
enough.
leave Miami out of this.
Okay.
But, you know, when you talk about how rich the art, you know, the culture of arts is in South Florida, and you're talking about Palm Beach and Miami, in our lane of LGBTQ, there's no one that rivals us in the country. We have more LGBTQ theaters, we have more LGBTQ museums, we have more LGBTQ music groups than New York or San Francisco.
Correct.
So, you know, I think I just want to make certain that we have this really vibrant LGBTQ arts life in South Florida that's unrivaled in this country. And a lot of that has to do with our fund, that we've been able to step in and support them. You know, and I said earlier, you know, we think of organizations like Island City Stage, which is probably the most established LGBT theater. There's Plays of Wilton, which is extremely popular, doing extremely great work right next door to Island City Stage. But then we have organizations, you know, I'll mention one, Thou Art Woman, which, if people are unfamiliar with Thou Art Woman, and I was unfamiliar probably 6 years ago when we started funding them, it's a group of lesbians, mostly people of color. And it's art, but it started off as mostly spoken word. And they came to us for a grant the first time, and I remember there was just this question mark that the panel had. I mean, they never heard of the organization. They were unfamiliar with that community, perhaps. And we stepped in with a grant the following year. They're now one of our, you know, consistent grantees year after year. Nice. And it's a really large community of women that they've built who have an appreciation for the arts. They're able to provide an artistic outlet for a community of women that would otherwise not exist. So anytime we can reach into the community and find voices that have not really traditionally been elevated, like people of color in the lesbian community, I think that's extremely gratifying. And because we're boots on the ground, I always say we don't give a grant to anyone more than 25 miles away from us. So we get to know these organizations. We can go out and seek them out and find them. Another young theater company called Brevo Theater Company, led by Zaylen. You know, we were one of the first organizations that stepped up to support them. And again, you know, we sought them out. We'd heard of them through the grapevine, and we went out and met them, saw their work, and thought this is something really valid that we want to get behind.
And very deservedly so, because they're doing phenomenal work. Zaylen was in a social entrepreneurship bootcamp program I was in with Radical Partners, and became a big fan and supporter of theirs.
We have so many great theater companies. I'm just going to go at the risk of upsetting all of the theater companies. I will say Brevo's production of The Brother Size is probably the best theater production I've seen in South Florida, and their work is incredible. I mean, there's so many other, you know, shows and art and companies I could name, but that piece in particular really showed me that there's an artistry behind them that people need to get behind.
And they're doing phenomenal work in the community, giving opportunities to not only established artists and actors, but even up and coming and emerging.
Right. And they're working with Island City Stage and Gable Stage on an upcoming production of Fat Ham that our fund helped kind of get off the ground with a funder, the Wharton Foundation. So again, they're on the move.
Oh, phenomenal. And Brevo is actually a great example. And you mentioned community, and, you know, a big part of community is the unity. And, you know, we live in a very well-cultured community. And we obviously, coming out of COVID, you know, we weren't able to go to events. We weren't able to unite and congregate and come together. But people that live here, that chose 954, that choose to live here, choose to live in a place where there are things to do. Right. And nobody wants to live in a place devoid of art, culture, and expression, or you would, you know, live in, you know, someplace cold up north. So by supporting these organizations, your fund, your organization does a phenomenal job of providing this way of life that we've afforded ourselves here in a well-cultured community like Broward County. And it really is not only changing the life of the organizations and the artists and the, you know, people that you're serving, but also the community as a whole that get to benefit from the services that these organizations provide. If somebody wanted to, and they're, you know, just finding out about you, and they want to support monetarily, don't, you know, what are some ways that people can get involved in support?
So, you know, our business model is a different one, right? So yes, we take donations to support our operations, but that's not what we're primarily out there seeking. You know, we always think if somebody has a couple $100s that they want to give back to the community, find your favorite organization and give it directly to them, right? You know, we don't need to be the middleman for that transaction. But what we're really here to do is talk to people about their wills and estates, because the fact is most people are worth more when they're gone than they are when they're here. And, you can't take it with you, old saying is true. And we're also at our Fund Foundation, because we're dealing with an LGBTQ community. Largely, we're talking about a childless population.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly there are exceptions, and certainly that's changing with the generation that's following. But we're talking about people in their 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s who may not have children to leave everything they worked for during their life. And I always say, even if you have nephews and nieces, they're likely to be in their 60s by the time you pass, and that gift you leave them is likely to transfer to their children, in 10 years following that. So really be thoughtful about the impact you want to leave and the imprint you want to make on the world when you're no longer here. So if people want to have a conversation about how they can help their community, that's the conversation we'd really like to have. I always say it's the sale of your car or your condo or your company, you're worth something. And, a $5,000 bequest to your favorite organization can make a big difference.
Yes, you can. So what, if you'd be so kind, what does that look like if I want to, name our Fund Foundation as the beneficiary of my will? Then what does that look like after I'm gone?
There's two steps to make that
before
happen.
I'm gone.
First, you need to just talk to an attorney and have your will drawn up and say whatever portion of your estate that you want to leave to philanthropy, you leave the Our Fund Foundation as the beneficiary. The second step is you come in and talk to us. We prepare a document that outlines exactly what your wishes are. You can say, I want it to go to arts and culture. You can say, I want it to go to LGBT health and wellness. You can say, I want our fund to make the decision on whatever the needs are of the community. You can say, I want it to go to Pride Center. You can be as specific as you want to be, and we can work through that process with you depending on the amount you're leaving behind, how quickly you'd like it to be spent. We can help you make the best decision to make the greatest impact.
And because this is the work that you guys do, you're able to advise that. I was listening on a previous podcast, in the event that maybe somebody designates either a certain category, maybe that category depletes, or a certain organization, maybe that organization folds, you guys are able to pivot and make sure that the funds are still being put to a good use as the donor and requested.
Right. So I always use as an example, we had a couple donors who passed away immediately before COVID, who left the instructions, our fund, we want you to make the best decision for whatever the needs are of the community. We were able to put $600,000 out into the community in the first 6 months of COVID, of impacting these organizations to keep doors open, lights on, salaries paid. Those people who are no longer here could have made those decisions had they been here. They had that kind of wealth, but in their absence, I think it felt good that our fund could step into that place and take the role that they would have filled.
And this comes at a very serendipitous time, and I've had this conversation privately, and it's a conversation that should be had more publicly. There are a few families of noteworthy names in this community that have supported the arts for a very long time, and it is no guarantee that their children are going to continue supporting at the rate that our community has depended on their funding. And one of those families was was renting a studio space to one of our most noteworthy sculptors in our community, who rented the studio for over 17 years in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And because now downtown Fort Lauderdale became a desirable place, they decided to increase the rent beyond the rate that this established and successful artist could afford to pay. So it is important to be proactive in having these conversations because, when you're gone, you can't have them after the fact. How about on the flip side of the coin, if there is an organization that's listening that's just finding out about our fund right now that would potentially like to be considered, maybe not this year, but maybe in future years, how could a nonprofit organization like a Breville Theater or the next Breville Theater get involved?
I love this question because it really isn't just a matter of picking up the phone and calling us or sending us an email. There's nothing more that we like is when we see an application to know that agency. So when we see your first application, we should know you. I always say we don't want to be an ATM. Right? We're of this community. We're in this community. There's no reason not to get to know us and have us get to know you before that first application comes through, and we can help you with that application. So I would just say reach out to me personally. Obed Caballero is our grants manager. Either of us are available at our fund.
And how can they find you on the internet?
You can find us at the ourfund.org. Just go to About Us staff, and there's our email.
And a pretty active Facebook page and social media presence as well. Certainly doing great work in the community. Certainly the being able to step in when the cuts were made was a great initiative that we give you and your public relations firm, Pearson Grant, a lot of credit for even bringing to light in the community that, this is newsworthy stuff. And by publicizing it, it does hopefully also encourage maybe others to be more philanthropic or consider where their funds are being donated, or where their impact is going to be made.
We're really fortunate, these relationships we have with agencies, that theater companies, the choruses. When I go and sit in the audience when they do their curtain speech, they always thank us as a sponsor, but they also talk about how easy it is for people to get behind our fund and make those same kind of contributions. So we're fortunate to have these partners and really understand what we do and the importance of what we do.
I have a ton of respect and give you a lot of kudos and credit for doing this work. Comes at a really important time, and I'm so glad to know that you're supporting more of the community. I didn't know that Brevo was a beneficiary, so I'm so glad to hear that. So certainly give you guys a lot of credit there. And if you're listening and you like the arts and you'd like to find out more ways to get involved, we are still hosting free tours of the Downtown Hollywood Art Walk every third Saturday night of the month at 7 o'clock. I lead the tour myself, been doing it for over 6 years, and it's Downtown Hollywood's come a long way. It's always evolving, places closed, places open. It's a nice time.
I was in Hollywood last night for one of our grantees, Thinking Cap Theater, on the anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote.
How about that?
They did a show last night that there were 4 different plays, and Thinking Cap Theater, another theater company that I try never to miss. I think their artistry is unmatched. The visual treat you get when you go to a Thinking Cap Theater show is really something to behold. But they had probably 80 to 100 people in the audience
on a Monday night.
Celebrating the passage of the 19th Amendment. I think only in South Florida would you get kind of that kind of support behind an effort like that, and it was a really well done show.
Hollywood really has come a long way. It has the largest concentration of public art murals anywhere in South Florida outside of Wynwood, with the Downtown Hollywood Mural Project. Art and Culture Center is doing phenomenal things.
We're a supporter of the Art and Culture Center.
Correct. Yeah. And they're about to have their Founders Brunch coming up to share a little bit more about the upcoming plans with the education component. If you mentioned the 19th Amendment, if you're a fan of women's empowerment, my business partner's wife started the pioneering craft beer festival celebrating and highlighting women in the craft beer industry called the Female Brew Fest, which will be on its 8th year, 7th annual installment, September the 14th at the Loop, which is Los Olas Oceanside Park. It is the pioneering platform to celebrate women that either own breweries or brew their own beer, which is actually annually one of the largest LGBTQ inclusive events, which, once again, brewing beers is a form of art, culinary arts. So that's September the 14th. That's the Female Brew Fest. Have another, my favorite community event, the event that gave me my aha moment that led me to doing this work today, that I still host to continue to pay back and pay forward, is a monthly breakfast lecture series. It's a mini TED Talk that I host for free every second Friday morning of the month. It's called Creative Zen. We host it inside the Cotilla Gallery at the Alvin Sherman Library on the campus of NSU, where my business partner is president of the Circle of Friends for the library's board. And basically, we bring in local people to share their thought-provoking, inspiring story that's generally relatable. I archive them, so I have the inspiration online. This month is a very good one for the arts that I would encourage every artist in Broward County to attend, or anybody in South Florida. It's Dr. Yanina Gomez, who is one of the co-founders of the Art Next Level platform, which, this is another gift for Broward County community. They're the leading arts, marketing, and mindset platform in the world that recently relocated from Chicago this last year. Her and her husband, Sergio Gomez, who also recently shared at Creative Zen, decided to choose 954 and move to Tamarack. Wow. So they host, they have an online platform education component that doesn't only just work on the marketing side of arts, but also the mindset. She's a psychologist. So she's going to share her thought-provoking, relatable story. We integrate a mindfulness moment with guided meditation and breath work from our friends at Rising Nature Retreats that helps to put the Zen in Zen before the speaker comes up to speak. Free breakfast, community, coffee, and all that. And then you could peruse the library for free. So that's going to be September the 13th. The doors open at 8:30. The talk starts at 9. We're out of there by 10. That's where I had my aha moment that led to this work, which is why I pay it back and pay it forward. And then with Dr. Yanina and Sergio, and because burnout is such a thing, and I've battled burnout, everybody, if you work hard at something, battles burnout. We created a Cruise for Creatives, a wellness retreat that's going to take place in March upon the Scarlet Lady with Virgin Voyages. So it's no kids, it's adult-only cruise. It is going to be a cruise, but we're going to have some workshop components and some talks to hopefully help people combat, or if you have the tools, skills, and resources, hopefully prevent burnout for creatives in specific, and kind of foster that community element. This came out of our Choose954 artist potluck that we do quarterly, that we host generally at our Zero Empty Spaces Gulfstream Park location. Another way for us to connect, engage, and get inspired, where artists come together, bring a plate that serves 5 or 6 people, because not everybody eats everything. So our next one, we do them quarterly. We've done 20 of them since pre-COVID. Will be just before Thanksgiving. I believe we're looking at the 2 Saturdays before Thanksgiving. So we host that at our Zero Empty Spaces Gulfstream Park location. And then I guess the last one, if they're not familiar with Zero Empty Spaces, as an arts advocate, me and my business partner started an initiative to activate vacant commercial real estate spaces to provide affordable working artist studios for artists to be able to create and collaborate affordably outside of their homes. And we're actually, fortunately, about to be provided our first space west of 95. All of our spaces have been east of 95. I grew up in Coral Springs, so we're actually about to make a deal for a space in the Promenade in Coconut Creek, which is a phenomenal lifestyle center. So we'll make more studios available for local artists. We currently have 67 in South Florida between 4 locations. They're all full with a waiting list at the moment, but we're always seeking new spaces and making opportunities available for these creative placemaking hubs for artists, because they serve as their studios, but they're also galleries. We don't take any commission. They host classes and workshops. We don't take a cut. And then we also have the potlucks there and other things there. And then they can invite their friends and the public and collectors and so on and so forth. So you can find out more at zeroemptyspaces.com. You can find out more at femalebrewfest.com, choose954.com. And a question we always like to end with, and you've already told us so many great reasons why, but what is the reason why you choose the 954?
So I've lived in a number of places. I've been fortunate to live in, I lived in Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Pittsburgh, San Jose. This is my favorite place I've ever lived, and it's because of the people. I think that people who end up in Broward are, certainly there are people like you who grew up here, but there's so many people who chose to make this their home. And there's something about the number of people who have made this their chosen home that they just, I think the way they adapt to life here and feel like they need to give back. I don't think it's just a coincidence that I said, this is the most vibrant LGBTQ arts community in the country. I think it's because there are so many people who have moved here or retired here, and this is what they want to do. They want to give back. So I think we're really fortunate.
And I'm so glad that you guys are giving the mechanism, giving another mechanism to allow people to give back. And this is, once again, still a relatively new component for many people, the donor advised phone component, or even just legacy giving. If you haven't established your will with your attorney, this is a great reminder.
It's a great time to do it.
My mother always reminds me to update it, and I do. And just maybe one last thing, to date, how big is the fund? How much have you grown it? Where are you guys currently at? What do you distribute?
So we're in the $25 million range, right? But I think the more important number is that we've got 170 households who are talking to us about their wills or estates. So if we conservatively estimate that those gifts coming our way are $1 million, we could be a $200 million community endowment in 10 to 20 years easily. So the growth potential is incredible. So we're thrilled that we're at $25 million, and we've had some really large gifts that have been left to us by some amazing people. But growth is on the horizon. We know that.
And then fortunately, we won't have to worry about future budget cuts.
Right.
And able to sustain the endowments and other.
And we won't
things.
have to worry about the family that you talked about who took away the
art studio.
The art studio, right? I mean, we'll already be established. So it's a great way to make sure that everything you worked for is protected and can support a community that you care about.
Amazing. Please keep up the good work.
Thanks.
And certainly would love to hear why you choose the 954. Always looking for more guests like him to have on the podcast to tell stories of amazing people doing important work in the community. And you really, showed it at a time when we needed it the most. So we really appreciate everything that you do. And we'll look to see you out in the community at some of the events. Cheers.